Okay, turning to you, Rushdi, I have not heard much from the other opposition candidates, including former Prime Minister Amama Mbabazi and others, because we had 8 candidates in this election, and we haven't heard much about what's going on. All we hear is between the government now and Kizza Besigye. What do you make of that?
It's good that you point that out. I mean, we've had at least in this election one candidate who was a woman as well running for the presidential on the presidential ticket. I think that the contestation between the two main leaders has overshadowed everybody. It could be well that the two people, well-schooled politicians, have planned their campaign quite strategically, and they knew what they were going to be doing going in, whether it was the use or abuse of state resources, or on the other side, a defiance campaign based on resistance. I don't think that the other candidates potentially have got their acts together when it came to the campaigning kind of process. So you see this dominance between these two people going at each other. On the one hand, you're seeing a defiance campaign which is well-groomed and potentially is very sophisticated, and on the other hand, the heavy-handed state repression coming in with shutting down of social media, house arrests, not allowing the campaigning to actually take place. I mean, prior to the election, you also saw this deployment of these crime preventers. I mean, it created an entire environment or context of intimidation, and you're kind of seeing on one hand now a situation where it's a question of who's brave enough to stand up and say the things which mean you're speaking truth to power, and at this stage it's just Besigye. So.
And Elizabeth on this side, yes, Milton.
But I'd just like to add something to that too. I think the conduct of the international community is also very important. And I think so far it's been encouraging. The United States Secretary of State, Kerry, came out with a very strong statement raising the questions about the credibility of this election. But that is not sufficient in itself. I think if the United States was willing to push and broker a solution in a place like Afghanistan, I think Uganda also deserves the same kind of attention. I don't think that you can say that the elections were not credible and then continue to conduct business as usual with General Museveni. At the very least, you cannot continue the same type of military relationship that you have with General Museveni. And this goes for the United States and the United Kingdom as well, because these are the two principal countries that support Uganda militarily as well as financially for its budget.
Well, very interesting point. And Elizabeth, I don't want to put you in a fix, but that's one of the questions people are wondering. We've heard on our report here that the UN is also very concerned about what happened in Uganda. The EU obviously said the Electoral Commission lacked transparency. Of course, Secretary Kerry talked about it, and nobody is saying this was credible. Which way does the international, where do we stand if you look at the international community as far as the elections in Uganda are concerned?
Well, certainly there have been a variety of reports coming from the many delegations of electoral observers that were in Uganda. I think that most, if not all of these reports have pointed out serious deficiencies. It is not clear yet how this will impact the international community's policy towards Uganda. Uganda, as you know, has a highly interventionist foreign policy and is very active in the region. They have been active in Somalia for years. The UPDF, the Ugandan Armed Forces, have formed the largest contingent of peacekeepers there. They were active in South Sudan during the civil conflict and certainly in other countries. Museveni has acted as somewhat of an elder statesman in East Africa over the past few years, over the past several years, decades even. He has led the drive to integrate East Africa through the East African community. He's been called on to mediate at different points, including being called on to be involved in the Burundi issue. And so I think it will be interesting to see whether the recent acts of repression and the challenges around this election will impact his legitimacy as a leader in East Africa.
All right, let me take, Milton, let me take a short break and I'll come to you.
Sure.
You're tuned into Straight Talk Africa. We'll have more of our discussion in a moment. But first, let's reveal some of the fantastic feedback we've received from our audience through social media And here's our letter of the week from a Straight Talk Africa Facebook fan. Our letter of the week comes from Mohammed Ahmed Mansour from Monrovia, Liberia. He writes, I would like to congratulate the people of Uganda for the peaceful polls, and I urge all Ugandans to accept the results for the sake of peace. Ugandans should acknowledge that it is rare for an incumbent in Africa to lose elections, and now that the election is over, let us rally around the winner to move the country forward.